This is the Launching Creative podcast, the place where creatives learn to be business-savvy creative professionals. We call ourselves the Anti-Starving Artists. We interview successful creative professionals so that you can be creative and make money. Welcome to episode number 3. I'm your host, Nick Parks. Welcome to the show. We have a very special guest in this episode. She left her background in the corporate world to start her own boutique law firm. She specializes in helping creative professionals with their legal needs. Allow me to introduce Shahrina Ankhi-Krol. How are you, Shahrina?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I just wanted to start the show with a little disclaimer saying that the content we discuss on this episode is for information purposes only. Shahrina, if you can take a minute and tell us why.
Well, it's only for informational purposes because anyone listening to this podcast would have a lot of background information that I wouldn't know necessarily. So in order for it to be legal advice, I would have to know the situation at hand in order to advise accordingly. But because I don't know the audience, I cannot make that legal advice. This is just for information.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's just find out a little bit about your background. I had mentioned leaving the corporate world. Just take a second to explain where you came from and what made you want to start your own firm.
Sure. So I've been in the legal field for over 10 years. I have done everything from working as a legal secretary to a legal assistant, a paralegal. I have worked with the Attorney General in Michigan. I've interned for a judge in Queens Supreme, and I've worked in various law firms. And I always wanted to eventually start my own practice because to me, that is the American dream, to have your own business, to thrive on your own. And, you know, it was for me to make that move, take that leap of faith, and just do it.
Building your own business is definitely a big part of the American dream. We're doing it here at Launching Creative, and it's a very exciting venture. When we were talking about ideas for this episode, we decided the copyrights would be a great topic. As creatives, I'm sure there are a lot of our listeners out there who are familiar with the term, but let's talk about the specifics and really break it down. So what exactly is a copyright, and how does it work?
So copyright is actually automatic on any original work of authorship. Now, what that means is once you create work, creative work, writing, drawing, sculpture, anything that is created by you, and you already have the copyright to it. Now, the way I explain copyright to my clients is it's your right to make copies of that work. You can make derivatives, which is, any form of reproduction of that. Say you have a drawing and you want to later produce that onto t-shirts. Now, you're the only one that has the right to reproduce that because you were the original creator. So that's basically an easy way of thinking about copyright. It's the right that you have to make future copy. No one else has that right unless you expressly give them that right to do so.
That's an excellent explanation. Since the Anti-Starving Artists consist of musicians, photographers, filmmakers, etc., it's good to know what exactly happens after we put our work out there. One question I had before we started this interview is how much a copyright costs. But you said that copyright is automatic once it's out there. So is there an official step we need to take, or is it okay for a creative just to put their work out there?
Every time you have an original work that is affixed onto a tangible medium. Now, let me just explain that before I go further into answering your question.
Sure.
That means your ideas alone cannot be copyrighted. Let's say you have this great, amazing idea for a book or a piece of music that you're going to play or sing. That idea, while it's in your head, is not copyrightable. But the second that you type it onto a Word document or you write it out, in your own handwriting, it's affixed onto a tangible medium. And at that very point that you affix it to a tangible medium, it automatically has copyright protection. You don't need to do anything further, technically speaking. However, you should always protect it with the Copyright Office, and that's a government entity. The reason you should always do that is because you get a registration number, and if there's any dispute in the future, that registration number really takes off a lot of time and effort and money to defend your word against someone else that has infringed on your rights. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. That makes a lot of sense. So it's just, I guess it's a little more official, and God forbid, if someone did try to steal your idea, you would have some sort of tangible proof stating that you had this idea before them.
Right. And if you don't have the registration number, it's a lot of he said, she said. And in the middle of it all, you would most likely need to seek legal counsel. And then it ends up costing a lot more to defend than if you would have just hired an attorney or talked to someone that can advise you properly on registering it in the first place. What I mostly see is, people who are so passionate about their work, creative-minded individuals, they're just so passionate that they oftentimes don't take these precautions to protect themselves beforehand. And they move on to bigger and better things. And then when an infringement occurs, they need to then defend it and end up spending a lot more money to defend it. They would have spent initially if they had just registered.
Okay. And does it take a little bit of time to do this? Do you think maybe that's one of the reasons a lot of creatives just avoid it and they don't do it right in the first place?
Obviously it takes some time, right? And not everyone has time in this day and age to sit down and do all this work. However, I also don't think everyone is aware of the gravity of the situation, because no one creates a work of art or literature or whatever it is that they create for it to be stolen by someone and for it to be used by someone else for someone else to make money. No one creates work thinking that it's just out there floating around for others to steal. It's always the work of the creator, the person that's creating it. And copyright basically protects that person's rights within the work.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I agree with that. It's not something that crosses your mind typically. I know when I've made creative works in the past, it's not something that I genuinely believed would happen, is that someone out there would steal my idea.
Not only emotionally devastating, it's oftentimes very costly financially. And it's not fair to the person who created the work in the first place.
Sure, I can imagine it would take you away from your business or take you away from your job. I guess it would be this long, drawn-out process.
Right, that's exactly it.
Okay, and yeah, and like everyone says, time is money, and now you're wasting time on defending what you know is right.
Yeah, and you'd much rather be doing something else with that time, maybe creating something new or, just relaxing. You don't want to get into that type of, trouble, really.
Right. And I think as a business owner, there are going to be things that you have to do that you don't typically want to do, things you aren't passionate about, maybe invoicing, follow-up emails, whatever it may be. Maybe it's not the actual creative process itself, but this sounds like it's something that is completely avoidable.
Right, because once you have that, that foolproof, I guess, registration number, if you see that someone is infringing on your rights, you can always send them a cease and desist letter. You can ask for damages that they have caused, financial damages to your business, to your reputation, by stealing your ideas. It can be as simple as a picture that you took and you uploaded to your website, and now you have noticed someone else on another website, using that image that you have taken and you have never given them the permission to use. So they have infringed on your copyright. And, if that picture has a registration number with the Copyright Office, you just have a lot more leverage into saying, this is mine. This is not yours. This is my picture, and I never gave you the permission to use it.
Okay, and that brings up a good question. Say if you need to send a cease and desist letter, what's a good timeline? How long should you give them to take it down before taking further action?
Well, that really depends on your entire situation. Obviously, the longer it stays on there, the more damage it's potentially causing to your business, right?
Right.
So obviously you would want them to take it down very, very quickly. But I would recommend that you speak to an attorney, because just, a cease and desist letter going from an individual versus someone that is in the legal profession, it just looks more serious.
And so are there any types of creative professionals specifically who should be concerned with a copyright, or do you think across the board every creative professional should focus on this?
I think everyone should be made aware of it at the very least. Let me ask you this question, Nick.
Sure.
Do you think any creative professional would create a work that they would want stolen by someone they never even met or someone that they even know? Do you think anyone would want that to happen?
I cannot imagine that happening, no.
So, that's exactly it. I just believe every creative individual should be aware that there's a risk lurking out there. And with the internet, it's so easy to just copy and paste people's work that, it's mind-boggling the amount of copyright infringement that's happening out there.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think there's a good amount of it that is unintentional?
Unintentional in the part of the infringer?
Yeah, the person who has stolen it, maybe they didn't realize maybe they just didn't realize they were stealing it. I mean, you would think they know they're taking something that they haven't created.
Right. Well, I think there's a little bit of both. There are some people who know that they shouldn't do it, but they do it anyway because they know that the policing isn't really happening with people who own copyrights, right?
Sure.
So they know even if they steal it, there's no ramification. Then there's the other group who just don't even know what copyright is. So everything online is free, up for grabs, I guess. That's how they think about it. So I think you have a mix of everything in there.
That brings up a great question that I would like to ask you. Let's say someone in England steals one of my designs. Would that create complications as far as legal matters go? Do copyright laws change from one country to another?
So every country has different laws, period, and it's no different for copyright. In the U.S., copyright laws are much more different than, let's say, I don't know, China. And also the enforcement issue when it comes down to it, the whole reason you are copyrighting your work or trademarking your business name, the whole point is to have protection. Now, if you don't end up enforcing your rights, there's no need for that protection. So in the US, you can actually go and police your rights, basically meaning you can, look around to make sure no one else is taking your work, taking credit for your work, and then actually enforce it by, using the laws that are out there. Not every country in the world would be a great enforcer. The US is good, because, you still have the right to sue someone if they won't pay your damages. However, I can't say how the laws are in every other country, but I can say that it is different in every country.
Wow, so it could get pretty tricky, it sounds like.
Yes. And also in the US, depending on when the work was made, the laws are also different. So if it was before, let's say 1979, the laws are a little different than if the work was created after 1979. Things like that. And also there's the public domain issue. After a certain number of years, your work will become, I guess up for grabs, for lack of better terminology. So anyone that is interested in copying it or taking it, they could, because it's in the public domain.
I've actually heard a very interesting story. So basically, once the creator dies, there are a certain number of years before his creations become public domain. I've heard that the company Disney keeps fighting to delay this process so that Walt Disney, the person, his characters can remain under the company's copyright and they can continue to make money. So the whole public domain thing, is that something that has been changing lately?
It has been changing a lot, especially with the popularity of the internet since the early 90s. A lot of this has changed. And I don't want to give general information on that just because it gets very technical and I didn't memorize all the years.
Sure, no problem.
But if anyone wanted to, contact me and ask me about specific years, I'll be glad to help with that.
Okay, perfect. And so you already stated that this is something you think a creative professional should hire an attorney to do instead of doing on their own?
Well, here's the thing, Nick. In the U.S., legal work is so vastly available. People in death row can potentially get themselves off of it because there is access to legal books, online databases. But, there's a reason that lawyers exist. They have more knowledge about the topic and there are little nuances that the lay person may not know about. So, if you're willing to spend a few more dollars here and there with an attorney than doing it yourself, you're probably going to save more in the long run.
The question is, how do you value your time? Do you want to try to save money by working in a field that isn't your area of expertise? Or would you rather pay a professional to do it for you while you focus on making money?
I believe that's the whole reason we have different professions. You would go to a doctor for a certain thing, but you may also look it up on WebMD, right? But it's completely different. It's a different experience. It's a different level of expertise. Your expectations are different for, going to a doctor versus looking up stuff on WebMD, although if you type in your symptoms, maybe it will give you the right answer, but you're just never sure.
That's a great example. And I think people can be reluctant to hire an attorney because they don't want to spend the money. But in the long run, it pays off to be prepared because you can spend a lot more when you're not.
At the end of the day, hiring an attorney at the back end will probably cost you more money because the attorney will have to review the entire scenario and try to undo everything that has been done wrong instead of having it done correctly from the beginning. So, you can continue with your own work, progress in your career while the lawyer takes care of whatever that, needs to be taken care of legally.
I just thought of an analogy, and this is within my field of design, graphic design, web design. And I remember learning this when I was in college. A professor said that so many designers, they take it as a challenge, Photoshop, and they think, sure, it's a bad photograph and I can fix it. And he was saying, if you just get the photographer to take the picture correctly in the first place, you're going to come out so far ahead.
I totally agree. If I wanted to get a headshot taken, of course I can put my camera, which is a really nice camera, on a tripod and try to do it myself. Of course it's going to take a picture, but is it the same as a professional photographer who knows everything about lighting and angles? It's not going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
So I personally like to go to professionals within their fields of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know of freelance designers. They'll get clients who are they're not very informed with the technology and what you use it for. And so maybe they have a picture of a field and then they have another picture of a car. And they say, can you take the car out of this and put it in this field? And you can take this out and put this in. And it's like, I can do it, but what's going to look best is if you have an actual picture of a car in a field.
Right. Right.
Well, great. No, this has been so much value that you've been sharing with us. This is excellent. It's something that I don't know very much about. I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't know much about this as well. And, hopefully we won't reach that point where we will have to take legal action, but it's just good to be prepared and to know all this up front. Okay, so a quick question. We briefly touched on having a cease and desist letter or sending one out. In your experience, and this might be a bit of a generalization, but would you say the problem stops right there? Or do people usually take it a step further?
Well, it really depends on how hard that offender or infringer wants to fight it. Sometimes they know that they did something wrong and they will just back down. Other times they just don't care and they think, if they have an in-house counsel, especially, meaning that they have an attorney or several attorneys on their payroll anyway, they will keep going and keep infringing because they don't think it's worth their time to respond or, to back down because they're getting so much profit out of infringing. So it really depends on who the infringer is and how much they're willing to put up a fight.
Wow. So it can get pretty brutal, it sounds like.
Yes, especially if the infringer is from a big company, and that has happened. I have had clients who are in the carpet making business. They basically design carpets and rugs, and these are several $1,000 rugs that the client sells. And he noticed one time that a bigger company stole his designs off the internet. So that one was a very hard and difficult fight because the other company was bigger than my client and they just didn't want to back down. And then I have other clients who design silverware that is sold to Macy's and JCPenney and other stores like that. And sometimes even the big stores like Macy's or JCPenney would steal your design and tweak it a tiny bit to just, make a very slight change. And then they can potentially argue that it's not your design. So because of all of these possibilities of infringement, you definitely should register your work, whatever type of creative work it might be.
Man. Yeah, and just to share a story from my own career, and this was before I was a professional. I mean, I was still in college, I was a student, and obviously I knew nothing about this, but we had a project where we had to redesign an actual business, a local business, and so I created some designs for this local business, and it was a complete rebrand, and just to be perfectly honest, I thought it was something that they needed. And so I reached out to them and I had some meetings and we were talking about actually using it. And I thought, well, how cool would that be to have a real world portfolio piece before I get into the real world? And, long story short, they took some of my proofs and found someone else to design it for them. And it was a very weird feeling because even though it wasn't my exact design, it was very, very, very obvious that it was my concept. And they found someone else to execute. And I had reached out to a mentor I had, and his advice was, well, because it was a class project and because it was just a small business, it really wasn't worth taking any legal action. But it was a great learning experience for me. I mean, that was not a good feeling.
No, because, you spent all this time and energy and as a creative person myself who happens to be an attorney, I feel like you always put a part of yourself into your work. Your work reflects who you are to a certain extent. So it's not just about the time or the money that you spend on your work. It really shows who you are as a person from the inside, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Your situation that you just mentioned, that would definitely be actionable. Obviously, it's kind of too late. Statute of limitations probably has passed by now.
Right.
But, even if it's a small business that infringed on your rights, they are liable. Big or small, they stole something from someone and they should have to pay.
Shahrina, this has been awesome. One of the main ideas my business partner and I had when we first started launching Creative was to equip creatives with practical, actionable knowledge that they just didn't get in school. You've provided some amazing content for our listeners in this episode, so thank you. I'd like to move on to my favorite part of the show. This is when we ask our guest a series of fun questions. So Shahrina, number 1, in launching your own law firm, what has been your number 1 skill?
My number 1 skill? Well, I think when you're starting off a business, be it in the legal field, maybe a bodega or, a multi-million-dollar ad agency, the challenge always is to get your name out there, to have a reputation in the community that you know what you're doing. For me, the biggest challenge has been, just getting clients, because New York City is so full of lawyers. carve out your own niche. And for me, because I have an artistic background, that has been extremely helpful in shaping my law firm. So I focus on the creative individuals because of my background.
Oh, well, that is the perfect segue to the next question, which was, what motivated you to launch a firm that helps creative professionals specifically?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that. So in high school, I worked at PS1 before it was bought by MoMA. I worked in PS1. I worked at the Whitney Museum for 3 years. I gave tours and I taught children how to create and interpret artwork. And I also worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So with all of those experiences, and I, while I was working in those amazing institutions, I was able to interview very well-known artists. I was able to go to their studios, to spend time with them, see the process, be involved in the creation of these amazing pieces of work that would end up in amazing, amazing museums. So because of all of that, all of the experiences I've had, this was just a natural segue after I went to law school to focus on creative individuals, because I know how passionate creatives can get, that they often either don't know, don't care, or don't have the time to care about legal protection. So I feel like because I can almost speak their lingo, I can most likely sway them to protect themselves legally as well.
Wow, that's such a cool background. And I mean, and that's one of the main reasons I moved to New York City, is because you can just have experiences like that. Experiences in world-renowned art museums and meeting cool people like that. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Thank you. It was an amazing experience. And, to be able to give tours in these great museums is just, at that age as well, while in high school, it really shapes your mentality. So I can almost guarantee that most lawyers out there will not have the perception I have on art.
One thing that really stood out to me when I met you is that you're creative. You own your own boutique law firm, and you have an amazing background in the art world. That's a powerful combination.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Who would you say has made a huge impact in your life?
Who would I say made a huge impact? My mother, I believe. If there's one person that I would have to pick, it would have to be my mom, because she has always been a career woman, and I've always just admired strong women in whatever profession that they're in. So if I had to pick one person, she would be it. And actually, one of my scholarships to go to college was based on an essay that I wrote about the woman that I most admire, which is my mother. And wow. That essay ended up being published in one of the magazines in New York City, and it was just a great time, I guess, for me, because it was an entire page of the Daily News, I believe it was.
What a cool experience.
Thank you.
And this next question, this is actually one of my favorites. If you were to host a dinner and you could invite any 5 people, living or dead, and there's no language barrier, who would it be and why?
Who would it be? That's a great question. Let's see. I think I would invite Cleopatra. Who else? Hitler. I don't know. Maybe some artists. I have no idea who I would invite, actually. But I'll be one of the people that's there, right?
Absolutely.
So I can ask all the questions.
You'd be able to ask the questions. And you know what's surprising is you're not the first person to say Hitler. That's very funny.
It's funny, too, because he was a pretty good artist. I don't know if you have seen his work.
Yeah, I know. He was a painter. And yeah, I mean, obviously very, very evil, but definitely a very brilliant person. So that would be an interesting guest.
I think so. But it's funny. I can't really think of anyone else at this point, but maybe if I come back to your show next time, I'll have that one prepared.
All right. That sounds like a plan. We can do that. What do you wish you knew more about today?
I wish I knew more about why the political scene in the entire world is almost erupting at this point. There seems to be some sort of an internal struggle in every country. And I feel like there's a human element that ties all of us together. Everything from the Zuccotti Park takeover and things going on in Egypt and Syria, all over the world. Really, it seems like. I wish I knew the common thread that's taking place and that's tying all of us together, because that would really show us more similarities in people than the differences that we always focus on. And that would not only help in creating business opportunities, that would also help in understanding each other better.
Wow, that's a beautiful answer. And you know what?
Thank you.
I've wondered the same thing, and I can't help but think a lot of it has to do with just the advances we've seen in technology and how we are more connected than ever before. It makes me wonder, do we have more happening? Are there more things going on, or are we just more aware, and do we find out more quickly?
Right. I guess we will just never know that, because before the internet, the world just seemed so much larger, right?
Sure.
We just didn't know. And there was a lot of mystery surrounding quote unquote faraway lands, and they're not so far away anymore. And I've done a lot of traveling on my own. By the age of 26, I had been to 19 countries. So for me, the whole aspect of people being different always posed quite a bit of question, as far as, I just never see too many differences in people from different countries, despite the language and the cultural barriers. At the end of the day, the major elements of life seems to be the same across the world. So I don't know if this is a new development, that, everything is sort of erupting and going kind of crazy, really. Or if it's always been going on and we just never knew about it as easily as we do now.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm a little jealous. Oh man, traveling is such a dream of mine, and that's amazing to have visited that many countries at such a young age.
It's good and it's bad. It's great and it's bad. Actually, I loved every second of it, but now I still want to travel. And having your own business and trying to establish yourself in a business, you can't just take off. So I'm having to put the traveling on hold for a little bit, but I hope to resume soon.
Makes sense to me. And what's one tip you'd like to share with people who are starting out right now?
Okay, what's the one tip? Well, be aware of the legal necessities out there, not just on copyrights, what we have discussed today, but everything that you may need from starting up your own business, protecting your name, your work, but also know your rights, know what ways you can actually end up making money if you see someone infringing on your rights, because it's not all about making money. However, if it's your work, you own the rights to it. So be very aware of who you're giving out information to and how you're sharing your information, because you may have all the right and honest ideas in your mind. However, the people you come across don't always have the best intentions.
Yeah, I mean, perfect example. I just learned today that there were some actions I could have taken and I had no idea. So yeah, know your rights. I love that. And if you could go back, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
Okay, what would I do differently? I would spend more time networking with people, because it's not about just having business. It's also about creating relationships. And the sooner you can put yourself out there and create relationships with people, the sooner you will start seeing the trust build up. And when people trust you, they're more likely to recommend you to a friend. And in New York City, if you are not being recommended by friends or family, then you can almost guarantee that you're not going to have a successful business, because there's just way too many of everyone out there.
That's true. I mean, people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. It's as simple as that.
Right. Okay,
and this is the last question we have, and this is my personal favorite. I always love to hear what the answer is going to be. So if you were given $1 million tomorrow, there are no taxes, no fees, nothing, $1 million cash, and it's perfectly legal, what would you do with the money?
I like that it's perfectly legal because I would have asked that question.
Oh, no, that's great.
Well, I would definitely set aside a little bit of money a portion of the money to give back to the community, most likely to help young women professionals to excel in whatever that is that they're doing. I would also like to travel and, just see more of the world. I think that's really, if I had $1 million to just, do whatever, I think that's what I would do.
Oh, that's awesome. Especially helping young women. I think that's so great.
Thank you. That's actually something I'm working on, although I don't have $1 million by any means, nowhere near it. I am working on something that is going to be helping the less fortunate young women out there. So more to come on that.
Wow, no, I'd love to learn more. Definitely. No, like I've said so many times, that you've just shared so many great tips today. I just want to ask, what would be the best way to find you? Would you be on Twitter, Google+?
Well, the best way to find me is through my website because it's constantly being updated. And the website address is www.ankhikrol.com. And my Twitter handle is Ankhi-Krol Law. And also on Facebook, it's Ankhi-Krol Law. So it's pretty easy, I guess. Once you go through my website, I have links on there too.
No, and I can vouch. Your website it stays updated. I looked at it this morning, and you had a lot of updates, and it's looking awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on our show, Shahrina. I'm going to put all this stuff on our show notes. We'll be linking to your social media channels and to your website so people can check you out, reach out to you if they have any questions, because I'm sure there'll be some great questions, and you'll be able to dig a little deeper.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Launching Creative podcast. Come check us out at launchingcreative.com and become an anti-starving artist by joining our email list. Please leave us a review on iTunes by going to launchingcreative.com/iTunes. I'm your host, Nick Parks. Until next time.